Which is better, the Samsung Galaxy A01 or the Samsung Galaxy A10e? Well, in this video, we're gonna find out. Hi everyone, this is Kevin here, coming at you with my comparison between the Samsung Galaxy A01 and the Samsung Galaxy A10e. Now, the A01 was launched in the spring of 2020, and the A10e was launched in early 2019. So these phones are basically a year apart. However, I've noticed that as the A01 has made its way to more and more carriers, the A10e is still being offered by those carriers. So even though the A10e is getting older and older as time goes on, it doesn't seem like the carriers are in any rush to phase the phone out. And that does make sense because it is a very good device. But since these phones do have so many similarities, I want to give you a breakdown of the pros and cons for both, showing you how they're different and how they're similar, so that you can decide on your own which one is the better choice for you. Now, the Samsung Galaxy A01 features a 5.7-inch display compared to a 5.83-inch display with the A10e. So a little bit of a larger display there with the A10e, and the two phones are about the same size. Maybe the A10e is just a little bit bigger, but in general, they both look very similar and they both feel very similar as far as the size goes. Now, looking closer at the displays here, with the A01, we're getting a PLS LCD display, whereas with the A10e, we're getting a PLS TFT display. So a little bit different display technologies, but I feel like both look good in the sense that they both offer really good looking colors. Now, neither of these two displays are going to be as good as a mid-range like the A51 or a flagship like the A20. But considering where these devices are in the market, it certainly makes sense that we're getting the displays that we're getting with them. And like I said, I feel like overall, you're still getting a good value here, and things do look nice. Now, both phones do feature 720p displays. We're getting a PPI of 301 with the A01 compared to a PPI of 295 with the A10e. With the A01, we're getting a 19:9 aspect ratio compared to a 19.5:9 aspect ratio with the A10e. And then finally, with the A01, we're getting a 75.1% screen-to-body ratio, whereas with the A10e, we're getting an 81.4% screen-to-body ratio. So a bit better there with the A10e. Now that does make sense because it seems like in general the bezels are a bit bigger with the A01, and the bottom bezel also appears to be larger too. Now both devices do feature water drop notches at the top, and in those notches, both phones do have 5 megapixel front-facing cameras. Now, as far as internal storage goes, there are some differences between these two phones. So with the A01, we're getting 16 gigabytes of internal storage, and with the A10e, we're getting 32 gigabytes of internal storage. Now, both phones do offer microSD card expansion. However, I've got to say, I feel like 16 gigs really is not enough with the A01. Again, you can add a microSD card, but still, I always like to have at least a bare minimum of 32 gigabytes of internal storage. Now you can see with the A01, I currently have 4.9 gigabytes remaining. And that's after installing a variety of different applications and taking some photos and videos. But we're definitely getting close to running out of storage here on the phone. So if this phone did have 32 gigs, we would still have quite a bit of remaining internal storage. Because you can see with the A10e, I have 14.8 gigabytes remaining, which is quite a bit, that's for sure. So I just want to point that out there. And in general, just based off of that, I would say go for the A10e. But let's continue on and discuss the other various highlights with these two devices. So there's no wireless charging with either of the two phones. You also don't get fingerprint sensors with them either, but they do both support Face Unlock, so that's good. Now taking a look again at the rear of the two phones, with the A01 we're getting a 13 megapixel main camera and a 5 megapixel depth sensing camera, compared to the A10e where we're just getting one 8 megapixel rear camera. Now the A01 supports portrait mode with the front and rear cameras, which is great. and the A10e does not support portrait mode. Now, to see full video and photo samples from these two devices, definitely take a look at my individual reviews that I've done of them. But what's interesting with the A01 is that the portrait mode is actually not a gimmick. It does work decently well. Maybe not quite as well as a flagship would, but it does actually work. So here's how things look with the front-facing cameras on both phones. So I do have live focus portrait mode enabled here with the A01, but I'll switch the A01 back to the standard selfie mode. Now I'd say that out of these two devices, the A10e actually does take better looking pictures with the front-facing camera, but again, you are losing out on having that live focus portrait mode. And then flipping over to the rear cameras in both devices, here's how things are. So with the A10e, we actually have this other mode where we can zoom in a bit more, but that's a digital zoom, it's not an optical zoom, so you can do the same thing with the A01 just by pinching in. But here's how things look through the viewfinders. I feel like in general, both phones do offer nice cameras, so it's not like one's bad and the other's good. Now, if you spend more money and you get a phone like the A11 or A21 or an A51, you're gonna get better photo and video quality without a doubt. But I'm actually pretty impressed with the quality that you can get from either of these two phones. I feel like they actually do get the job done and they are pretty decent. Now internally, with both phones, we are getting 2 gigabytes of RAM, but the processors are different. So with the Samsung Galaxy A01, we're getting the Qualcomm Snapdragon 439, compared to the Samsung Galaxy A10e, where we get the Samsung Exynos 7884. Now in my opinion, I actually prefer the Snapdragon 439, and that's not just because it's from Qualcomm, but also because I feel like the performance in general is better. So it's not like the A10e is much slower, but I feel like you're going to be getting a better experience with the performance of the A01. Now, as far as 2 gigabytes of RAM goes with these phones, I do wish we got 3. I feel like 2 sometimes isn't quite enough. But if you're just using these phones for basic tasks, maybe you're not a power user like I am, for example, then these will get the job done. If you're doing calls, text messages, occasional social media, you're not going to run into really any sort of major performance issues. So that's good. Now with both devices, video recording maxes out at 1080p. Both phones also feature pretty beefy 3000 mAh internal batteries. And since these devices are not too high performance, they are going to be relatively battery efficient in general. So that's a good thing. So expect to get decent battery life with either device. Now, as far as the software goes, with the A01, we do have Android 10 with Samsung's One UI 2.0. And with the A10e, I've heard that some A10es have gotten the Android 10 update, but as of now, this device, which is actually from Metro by T-Mobile, does not have Android 10. It does still have Android 9 Pie, but I am looking forward to eventually getting that Android 10 update. Now, the thing is that you want to keep in mind is that once the A10e does get Android 10, that's going to be it. It's never going to get any other major OS updates. It might get some security patches, but that's all. And with the A01, I'm pretty sure we're going to get Android 11, because typically with the lower end A-series phones, you do get at least one major software update. Now, is that actually important with the updates? That's debatable. It just depends on the way you use your phone and if you really care about it. But I'm just throwing that out there, letting you know what to expect with these two devices. But now that we've gone over the specifications of the two phones, let's take a closer look at the hardware. So I already talked quite a bit about the front panels here. Almost a near identical design, really. Maybe a little bit of thicker bezels with the A01, but in general, both phones do look quite similar. You can certainly tell that they're from the same company. Now, taking a look at the left side of both phones, there are some differences. So with the A01, we do have the volume button, and with the A10e, we have the slot for the microSD card and SIM card. Then taking a look at the right side of the two phones, with the A01, we have the slot for the microSD card and SIM card and power button. And with the A10e, we have the volume button and power button. Then taking a look at the top of the two devices, with the A01, we have the 3.5mm headphone jack, which I personally prefer to be on the bottom, but this is how it is. And with the A10e, we just have the noise canceling microphone. And then taking a look at the bottom of the two devices, and I want to point out that with the A01, this can be different based on if you're getting the phone internationally unlocked or if you're getting it from a carrier. But my specific variant, which is the international version of the phone, does give you micro USB at the bottom. But I've heard that with the A01, pretty much any variant of the phone that you get from a US carrier is going to give you USB-C. So that's pretty interesting. But we also get the microphone. And then with the A10e, we get 3.5mm headphone jack, USB-C port for charging and data transfer, microphone, and speaker. So typically, if a phone does have a micro USB port, I am pretty disappointed, but it does seem like most people that would end up buying this phone in the US will be getting USB-C. So I do applaud Samsung for at least doing that in the US market. And then taking a look at the backside of both phones, they are both plastic. However, we are getting a glossy finish with the A10e versus a matte finish with the A01. I actually prefer this matte finish. I think it looks really good. I also really like the way that the phone does look in this bright red color. But both phones do feature a plastic polycarbonate material here on the back. Now, we do have the camera modules right there. I already talked about that, but we are getting that extra depth sensing camera with the A01 with the Samsung logos. And then with the A01, we do have a rear speaker. So in general, both phones look nice. They feel decently high quality, especially considering that they're both pretty low-end phones. So I don't really have any complaints about them, that's for sure. Another thing that I'd like to point out as well is that the A01 only supports 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi, whereas with the A10e, it supports both 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz. Now that might not be the case for the specific carrier variants of the A01, so if you do have the carrier variant of the phone, then let me know if you can get 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi, but I'm pretty sure that every variant of the phone only supports 2.4. Let's now do a speed test comparison between these two phones. So we're gonna start by pulling up the camera app. So 1, 2, 3, go. And it seems to be about the same with both devices, which is interesting. Let's now go to Google Chrome. 1, 2, 3, go. And it looks like it was, again, very close here with both phones. Maybe a little bit quicker with the A01, but not by too far, that's for sure. Let's now go to yahoo.com. 1, 2, 3, go. Looks again to be about the same with both devices, maybe slightly quicker with the A10e, but again, really no major noticeable differences with either of these two phones. Let's now go to engadget.com. 1, 2, 3, go. Let those load up. It's working on it. Okay, and it looks like the A10e was a little bit quicker, but the A01 really isn't too far behind either. And this is a good opportunity as well to compare the way that the displays look. You can see with the A10e, things are a little bit on the cooler side, but also a little bit brighter. I do have the brightness up to 100% on both phones, by the way. But again, the displays are similar enough where I don't really think one really stands out from the other. I suppose the A10e does have the better display of the two, but again, nothing too major with these displays. So in conclusion, which of these two devices is the better option? So the first thing that you might want to consider is the price. Now, since these devices are being offered on prepaid carriers for the most part, and also some postpaid carriers, you're most likely not going to be paying anything for either phone. These devices typically are offered for free if you're porting in from another carrier, or they'll give you a very generous, affordable upgrade price. So as far as the price goes, you're not going to be paying, I can't imagine you'd be paying anything over $100 for either phone, especially if you do buy them through a carrier. And if you are buying them unlocked, then you are going to be paying more. But I would definitely look into seeing if your specific carrier does offer either of these phones at the carrier before you consider buying the unlocked variant, because you most likely are going to be saving a lot of money. Now, the biggest difference really that I could see with these two devices is the storage. It's a pretty big deal that you're getting double the amount of internal storage with the A10e compared to the A01. So in that regard, the A10e wins, but really, beyond the storage increase, everything else about the A01 is better. You're getting better cameras with more options. You are getting a newer variant of Android out of the box with a major update most likely happening in the future. And I also like the way that the A01 looks as far as the color. So I would say that the A01 is the winner out of these two, except for the storage part. So Having 32 gigs of internal storage instead of 16 is a pretty nice advantage with the A10e. So I suppose take a look at your current phone, how much storage you're using, and from there, you should see if the A01 can even fit all the content you have on your phone. For example, if you already have a 32 gigabyte phone and you're using over 20 gigabytes, then the A01 probably won't be that great of a choice for you. I know you can still use a micro SD card, but I still think that going for the extra internal storage does have its advantages. So I hope this comparison between the Samsung Galaxy A01 versus the Samsung Galaxy A10e helped clear some things up for you and made it an easier decision when deciding which phone to get. But I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, let me know in the comment section below, and I will see you in the next one.